From time to time, in one way or another, most of us can relate to having an inability to focus, being easily distracted, being poorly organized, and sometimes being impulsive. For those that suffer from ADHD, this can be particularly problematic in day-to-day life, and a person with ADHD has a higher risk of injury, depression, unemployment, imprisonment, and those with ADHD also have a higher divorce rate than the average population. Fortunately, thanks to modern technology, the development of more accurate diagnoses are underway, and in today's episode, we'll be speaking with Carl Reuterskiöld, CEO of Qbitec, a company giving healthcare professionals objective data to inform decisions about ruling in or ruling out ADHD. Now, if you like this episode of Brains Bite Back, some other Brains Bite Back episodes that you might like are how to unlock your creativity with fun-based neuroscience techniques, how to retain more information, improve recall, and learn a new language, along with changing the chatter of our inner voice from destructive to productive. I'm Sam Breakgear, and this is Brains Bite Back, your podcast exploring the intersection between technology and psychology.
Thank you so much. My name is Carl Reuterskiöld. I'm the CEO of Qbitec, and Qbitec stands for Quantified Behavioral Technology. And in essence, that's what we do. We measure human behavior, and we do that through software and a camera. And we use that data to support clinical decisions during primarily diagnosis, treatment, monitoring, and treatment initiation. And our focus so far has been measuring activity, impulsivity, and attention. And those are the three core symptoms of ADHD. ADHD is something that is very common, and we can talk more about that. But it has for a very long time been diagnosed using very subjective methods. But the objective data that we capture through our software and our camera is compared with a database that we have of people both with and without ADHD of the same age and gender as the patient taking the test. And that means that we can create an unbiased objective view of that patient's symptoms compared to a person, as I said, of the same age and gender, but also see exactly how a treatment affects that person, that patient. And this is of tremendous value for both the clinician as well as the patient to understand really what's going on with them. And Qbitec today is a Swedish company. We are market leaders in ADHD digital care management. And we have customers at the moment in 13 countries, in the US and in Europe, but also in Australia. Research in more countries than that. And at the moment, several thousands of clinicians are using our tools on a yearly basis, and we have so far supported more than 600,000 patients.
Fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about what you do as well as ADHD, really, because I have to admit I have a shallow knowledge of what it is. I have some friends that I know have it, but I can't necessarily always identify what behaviors are the result of their ADHD. And of course, I don't know if this is a common theme, but I've definitely heard a lot of rappers and rap songs talk about ADHD and how they have it. So maybe that's a common trait among them. So I'm very interested to know more about it, first of all. So could you start off by telling us, like, what is ADHD?
Sure, absolutely. Now, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, and it's a very common disorder for both children, adolescents, and adults. Typically, you would say that about 5 to 7% of all kids have ADHD, and then a bit lesser extent when you grow older. A person with ADHD has problems controlling their activity, impulsivity, and attention. That leads them to have significant difficulties in their daily lives. It could be, typical churns in school or at workplace. The problem with ADHD is that, of course, all people are active and all people are impulsive and all people, have various degrees of attention. So it has been for a very long time a problem to clearly differentiate between what is problematic levels and what is not. And when we look at our databases and look at the population overall, we can see that attention, impulsivity, and activity is distributed like IQ. It's a normal distribution. So people have it to various degrees. And what we do is actually we, in an objective way, can identify where a person is on that curve and to see where this becomes an issue of your in your daily life. ADHD is not a disease; it's a disorder. But a person with ADHD has a high risk of injury compared to a person without ADHD, higher risk of depression, high risk of poor school results, higher risk of unemployment, divorce, imprisonment, etc. So ADHD is a significant issue for the person that is affected, but it's also a significant issue for the society as a whole. And I think that the problem with ADHD is that ADHD in most parts is not really well managed. For a long time, there has always been discussion about if ADHD even exists. And what we see today is that the research is there. ADHD is well defined in the literature. There's nothing to question about ADHD. But what we see today is that the care process is not really well managed. The average waiting times in Europe, for example, is about 2 years from initial concern to an assessment, and about the same time to get treatment. In the US, for example, the problem is a bit different, where often the assessments are quite limited in scope and are quite basic, leading to quite quick decisions that in many cases lack key data. But it's also a problem that, as I said before, a lot of the data that you capture is subjective. You talk with patients, you talk to the parents, you talk to teachers and others, and subjective data is very difficult to base a clinical decision on. And in many cases, the patient has problems really understanding why they receive a diagnosis and also to accept that. And it's also difficult to initiate treatment and to measure treatment's effects if you only have subjective data. So, that's where we come in. What I really like about, working within ADHD is that if you identify ADHD and if you treat it in the right way, the risk for the individual patient is reduced to be at the same level as the population as a whole. And this is, fantastic. If we do our job right, if the clinicians do their job right, and if the patient understands, why they receive a treatment, the risk for that person is reduced to zero. And that's really, a basis for our vision as a company, to improve the lives of people with ADHD. And that's really something that we, are passionate about, and really something that we are striving for every day.
That's really inspiring to know, and it's good to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel for anyone dealing with the issues there that you mentioned. And I would love to get into like how the work of Qbtech is helping and what you folks do. But before we get into that, I would love to know first, like, how did the company begin, and how did you first get started or become interested in like the work revolving around ADHD?
Qbitec was founded in Sweden in 2002, so we actually turned 20, 2 months ago, and we tend to see ourselves as one of the oldest startups, having a startup mentality, and the Qbitec was actually a result of a merge between a family's wish to improve the way ADHD was managed with a psychologist's development of a new test for ADHD. The family had been very successful in various businesses, but they also have had family members with ADHD that have had, both really good experiences of care, but also quite poor ones. And, when they met the psychologist that had developed this new test, they really saw a potential to improve ADHD care. And for the family, this combination of their, in their successful careers together with this new test, allow them to see a potential to really transform ADHD care, and that's what it has been all about since then, to try to transform ADHD care and to improve lives of people with ADHD at the end. I started at Qbitec in 2010. I have a background in the pharmaceutical industry actually, and I was working a lot towards finding new models to bring pharmaceuticals to the market and pricing them based on results, what type of results they achieved. And I worked a lot with smoke cessation and only charging for the end result, which was a person stop smoking. And I saw quite interesting parallels with Qbitec, where we looked into different ways of bringing our tools and products to the market by focusing on the outcome of those products instead of just focusing on a test.
Hopefully you're enjoying the show, and if you are, make sure you subscribe and never miss an episode. You can find us on all your usual podcast sites: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and a whole lot more, including YouTube. And we want to hear what you think, so be sure to leave us a review. Just search Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you're with us there. I'm glad you're with the company. And I would really be interested to know now, like, what does Qbitec do to help further the progress and understanding of like ADHD care, and how does it stand out from previously produced work?
Yeah. So what we do is actually we provide, as I said, objective data around the symptoms of ADHD. And those data points can be used to compare a patient with a norm database or with previous tests. And of course, that can lead to improved diagnosis and improved treatment outcomes. And what we do a bit differently than other companies is that, to be a bit blunt, Qbitec is actually a completely new type of company with ADHD. We have taken a quite different approach than what we have today in the marketplace. The products that are available today are mainly research tools that have trickled down into clinical use. And in many cases, these tools were never designed or developed to be clinical tools. They were instead designed to be, fantastic research tools. But it also means that they lack a bit of the basic features of a product. So what we do is quite different. We have first of all, we have a company that is completely focused on improving the lives of people with ADHD and improving the processes in ADHD care. So for example, our IT people are working very hard to integrate multiple data sources from various systems to give clinicians the full picture for every patient. Today, for example, in roughly 60-70% of all assessments, key data is missing because it's difficult to collect data through the various systems in healthcare. Our development team, for example, is working very hard to provide our products on multiple platforms. So you can, for example, do our tests from your home instead of just going to a clinic. And this, of course, allows access to high quality healthcare, not only in metropolitan areas, but also in rural areas. The medical team is working a lot with ADHD community to improve diagnosis and to really fundamentally understand the mechanisms behind ADHD. And we also have a commercial team that is working very hard to make sure that our customers and the clinicians using our tools are fully trained and confident when using our products. So we are taking a quite different approach, not just selling a test, but to actually provide a complete solution for a clinic to provide high quality care to patients, regardless if they are in the clinic or at home, for example. And I think, our approach became very real when the pandemic hit, 2 years ago. Most of our customers got locked down, like, in so many other industries, and their patients lost access to care. And given our focus on accessible care for a long time, we already had projects in late stage development, and we also had done research. So within a month, we could provide our tools to our customers and their patients, enabling home testing. And that meant that our customers could get back to pre-COVID levels, very rapidly, some within 2 to 3 months already, while clinics that are not using the telehealth solutions are still struggling. So I think we are doing something that is really interesting, and something that is actually quite different from what had been seen before in ADHD.
Yeah, it sounds like your approach has many layers to it. It's a very holistic approach to this, and I'm glad to hear that you are increasing like accessibility outside of just the physical clinical setting, because that seems like something, whenever it comes to any kind of healthcare or anything along these lines, that seems to be like a number one driving factor, just to make it more accessible, certainly in homes. And I think, yeah, that's been one of the few benefits that's come from COVID, in the sense that there's definitely a need for this now. People more aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that COVID has been an awful thing for a lot of people. But one of the side effects of COVID has been that the change within telehealth in the US and in Europe and in the rest of the world has been tremendous. The numbers of online visits have gone from a very, very small part of the total numbers of visits to being actually almost the majority now. And I think this change has really, the COVID has really catapulted the development of telehealth with at least 10 or 15 years.
What you're saying makes absolute sense. Now, I would love to know as well, like, if you can share some specific case studies of how Qbtech works, or how its work has made a difference, rather, in the space of ADHD.
Well, I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier about access, I think that there are two ways that our products really make a difference. One is, of course, better access to care, and I think we have many examples of that. But one, for example, is a customer that we have in Oklahoma City in the US. They used to be able to support the greater Oklahoma City area. It was, people and the patients living close to the clinic that are able to see them. But they bought our telehealth services a year ago, and they have now managed to increase their patient volumes almost 7 times. Where a large portion of their new patients are coming from, rural communities around Oklahoma City that had less access to high quality care before. And that has really, changed the lives for those patients, but also for the way that they are working. And that's been a tremendous, boost for access to high quality ADHD care in that area. So that for me, that is a really big difference for a lot of people there. I think another area that we make a big difference is providing better care, and we do that by providing objective data, and we do that by providing it in a standardized way. And one of the most notable case studies that we did was actually a research study, a randomized study including 10 NHS clinics in England, and the study was called Aqua. And that showed that if you introduced our test, in this case Qbitec, into their clinical practice, that lead times for an assessment was reduced. In many cases, the lead times were halved, and that the clinical quality was improved. as well as the experience by the patients and clinicians were very high. And that, together with other health economic studies that we have done in this area that shows significant financial benefits, enabling then more patients to get care for the same money, but also to get better care. So I think for me that is some of the case studies that suggest the value of our products. For me, I think also, it's very easy to get lost when you're talking about patient volumes and clinical quality. At the end of the day, it's very important to remind yourself that we are serving individual patients, and we do receive a lot of emails and phone calls, etc., from both patients and parents and so forth, about how our products have changed their lives and what difference it makes for them in their everyday for them. And for us, that is something that makes us truly happy and makes the owners and the founders of Qbitec, the family behind Qbitec, even more happier. So for us, that's really the ultimate ticket that we're doing something right.
I can imagine, yeah, it's very rewarding seeing those emails and those messages. And not only that, but it's really nice to hear that you're having such a widespread impact. It's not just localized to one place, but really all over the world and many communities. So that's fantastic to hear. And really, my final question to you would, I'd just be curious to know, like, what's on the horizon for Qbitec now?
It's a good question. I mean, ADHD is a really big area, and today, unfortunately, we see that there's a large number of patients that are affected by ADHD, and that there also are large inefficiencies in mental health care. And what we see today is very long, very costly, and suboptimal processes. And to make things even worse, we have seen that there is an ongoing crisis in the young population within mental health care, and COVID has further worsened this situation. So the pressure on the healthcare system is truly enormous when it comes to mental health care. And for us, it's very important to address those issues. And what we are trying to do is to improve the process from early signs of ADHD through the referral process to an assessment to treatment, and then to live with ADHD. And we believe that our technologies that we have already, but also some of the ones that we are developing and hopefully will be able to launch in the very near future, will improve in all of those stages, from early signs of ADHD to living in ADHD, and try to involve both the professional as well as the patients in that process. I think that the processes that we have today are very old, and through software as a medical device and through other digital health technologies, these processes can be vastly improved. And I think that's really exciting news for our customers, and it's also really positive for the patients.
Yeah, fantastic. I have to say, I really do wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors there, because it sounds like you're doing some fantastic work. And if people do want to keep up with the work that you folks are doing there at Qbitec or yourself, is there any kind of website or social media that they can follow or that you would recommend?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they can go into our web page, qbitec.com, and we also have LinkedIn and other social media channels, Twitter, that they can follow us on.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. And yeah, like I said, keep up what you're doing. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Growing a company has many hurdles, from securing funding to expanding your business capabilities to ranking better on search. Each business challenge is uniquely complex. The solution to these challenges is growth-focused digital PR and marketing, and that's where our sponsor Publicize comes in. Publicize sets itself apart from traditional PR companies. It does not charge large retainers or churns out press releases whether you've got a newsworthy announcement or not. Publicize builds on your business's online presence and gets high quality PR and media coverage for startups and entrepreneurs who are priced out of a broken PR industry. And for a limited time only, exclusive to Brains Bite Back listeners, you can receive a social media assessment as part of your package for any tier of service at no extra charge with this special promotion. To find out more, visit publicize.co/BBB. That's publicize.co/BBB. This is the end of today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this and you want to hear more episodes just like it, then follow and subscribe to Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube under the channel of our publication, The Sociable. Just search Brains Bite Back and you'll find all of our episodes there. We really love hearing what you have to say, so leave us a review on iTunes or on any other podcasting platform to let us know what you think. You can also reach out on Twitter at The Sociable. And finally, go to sociable.co where you can find all our episodes and plenty of articles on topics just like this. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.